Hello, welcome back. So, hope that these videos are really helping. They're really excited to me because I get to share what my thoughts are um, and go from there. So, I have an interesting book today. It's kind of like a lot to do with like psychology. Psychology is kind of like knowing the person, knowing how the brain works and behaviors and thoughts. And the book's called "You Can Read Anyone" by David Lieberman. He's a PhD, very well-known uh, science illustration, very well-known author, speaker. He's an expert in human behavior, and he's written several books, and this is just one of them. And this book kind of says that, hey, you know what? Body language, or it telling somebody that it's seeing what they are expressing to you when you're talking to them kind of gives you clues to who they are. And so is that a good thing? Yeah, but sometimes if you work in a field that you have to pick up cues or clues from people, it's good to kind of have a little background and kind of know who you're talking to sometimes and see if they're really truthful, I guess, or maybe they're just lying to you. And so here we go. This book offers insights into understanding of people's thoughts and intentions by observing their behaviors in body language. Very interesting for body language. I mean, you can tell when somebody does this, they're closed off. Maybe they just, okay, I don't really want to keep talking to you. Maybe they're pondering and thinking. There's a whole lot of body signs. Maybe if somebody's just looking all over the place, their eyes are just kind of going around the room. Maybe they don't want to be there. Maybe somebody's checking their watch or smartwatch or something like that, or checking their phone, every so often. And then maybe they're expecting a call. Maybe they just want to get rid of the conversation. And so this book was written in 2007. So it's a little outdated, but the ideas are still there. So we have what we call psychological principles and these practical strategies for deciphering nonverbal cues and other patterns of human behavior. So we express those when we go out and maybe we meet somebody, or just how we act in a normal day. So we have what we call the unconscious mind. So our unconscious attitudes, and the unconscious means you don't have to think about it. It just happens. So let's say that you see someone on the street and you get really angry about it because that's something that you're seeing that somebody did, and you get kind of angry about it. And so he says, well, I would never do that. Or maybe on the other side is that you see somebody do it and it's like, you think, whatever, they deserve it, I don't care. So you have this attitude in your position in life where you have this subconscious that's kind of maybe telling you, like, you know what, just do it. Just go for it. Just go ahead and do it. Who cares what happens? And sometimes you're like, well, if I don't want to do that because then I get in jail, or I look, it's not my character, not my personality. And so a lot of times when you're meeting somebody, your eyes give a lot of your characteristics, your personality away. So sometimes that when you're meeting somebody, like in a job interview, you always kind of want to make sure you look people in the eyes when they speak, because that means you're kind of engaged. You're engaged in their conversation. You're not just kind of there and says, okay, you're just wasting time. But the eyes really tell a lot about a person. It depends on where they're looking. Sometimes they're always looking down. Maybe a person's just looking down all the time. It could be a sign that they just don't care, or maybe they're depressed. If somebody's looking up all the time, it's like, okay, they're curious. Maybe they just they're thoughtless. I don't know, but eyes do tell a lot about somebody. And so your voice, a tone, can mean somebody too. So when maybe somebody's very quiet and they just don't really, they're very talking so low. Maybe they're not an angry person. Or when somebody's talking, yelling at you, because maybe they want to get their point across, and that's how they do it. They think that if they raise their voice and their tone, they're going to get stuff done that way, and that's how they present themselves. And so that was kind of the question that Lieberman was asking about, and a lot of it was facial expressions. I mean, somebody like, if they're staring at you and then they smile all the time, maybe they're just a happy, gullible person. Or maybe they're hiding the fact that they're just like, I'm trying to, fake it till you make it kind of thing. I'm just trying to be here until you look away. And it's also the words people use. So sometimes if a lot of people use the words I or me, that tells that they're very arrogant, or maybe oh God, there's another word for it. But it's all about them. But if they say, hey, this is about us. This is we can do this. You can do that. We can go over there, and they use that plural. That tells them that they're very collaborative person. Their involvement with people. They're people orientated. But me is very selfish, I think. And so the language people use is a very powerful indicator to kind of tell what a person's thinking and the impact they're thinking about. So that perceiving and constantly feeling about what people hear is very concerned, hearing somebody. And that kind of tells all those indicators of a person's, like their eyes or facial experience, maybe their body language, tells them maybe about their character, maybe their self-esteem. Remember, self-esteem is kind of how you feel about yourself. So sometimes confidence and self-esteem can be, David Lieberman says that self-esteem is often confused with confidence. And that kind of means that, self-esteem is defined by how much a person likes themselves. And they're really warm about themselves. Confidence is kind of like, hey, how effective I can do it. I have confidence that I can jump over that railing into that water. Or my self-esteem says, well, I feel good about myself, but I'm not going to do that. And so that's probably one bad example, but it kind of, confidence kind of says, I'm able to do that. The effectiveness. Self-esteem is kind of like the feeling of it. And so it's like you're going on a date your first time, or you're going to find a date, and you feel confident that you can go up there to that person and ask them out or have a good job. But your self-esteem, you don't really have self-esteem to continue on. Kind of make it work. So David Lieberman he was quoting this, and he read a study is that if you had more self-esteem, you feel more confident and you're feeling more in control of yourself. And the opposite is true sometimes. If you don't feel very good, you're not going to do well. So when a person is nervous but tries to appear otherwise, this is what we call, it's called perception management. And so a person attempts to present a certain image in order to convey the right effort. So they're lying to themselves, and because they're trying to get something out of it. And so they do that. And their perception is a little bit different than, their outlook on life is a little different than maybe another person. And so studies concluded that when we are around people we think are better looking, if they're better looking. So if you sit somebody next to somebody and you obviously look like they're, oh my God, they're better looking than I am, then what do we tend to do sometimes? Well, sometimes if people have low self-esteem or an image, they're going to kind of be, oh my God, no, maybe defensive, because they're going to feel less confident, because it's like, well, now somebody's in the room, more beautiful than I am, handsomer than I am, so I'm just going to be like, okay, I'm just second hand now. Well, yeah, think of it that way. I mean, we get very defensive sometimes and inadequate when that challenge, I guess it's a challenge, you can call it a challenge, but we see that in ourselves, and we see it as a potential threat. So we feel uncomfortable. It's a potential threat. Oh my God, he is more beautiful, whatever. When things are going our way, though, we feel better, more confident, obviously, and more optimistic in other related situations. So generally speaking, when we're more optimistic, a person is, they're more optimistic about their future. So if you have more optimism and feel good about yourself, your future is going to be a lot better outlook. And the other way happens as well. And so if you have a self-interest in something, so it's kind of like you built a self-interest in trying to get to know somebody, or maybe you don't. Your self-interest is that I want to be very introverted all the rest of my life, and that's all I want to do. Well, that's your choice. And when a person says that they don't have no time, say that until you meet somebody that they don't really have time to do anything with you. they probably mean that their self-worth is not up to it. And so sometimes we do that. Well, there's certain people, individuals, is that they don't want to spend time with anybody because they like to put themselves in a bubble or close themselves off to society because they don't want to. They're too afraid to try new things or new relationships because they don't have that confidence. They don't have that self-esteem. And sometimes you can really meet a guilty person. So a guilty person wants to avoid an accurate reading, while the innocent person wants to test to be accurate as possible. Let me read that again. Guilty persons want to avoid an accurate reading, while the innocent person wants to test the accurate as possible. So if you're guilty of something, you're just like, well, oh my God, you're gonna avoid an accurate reading of yourself because you're trying to hide your guilt. So let's say you tipped over something, you stole something in the supermarket, and somebody's confronting you about it, and you kind of say, well, no, I didn't do that. I didn't do it. And they said that and nobody wants an accurate reading, so you're trying to hide your emotions in a way. But let's say an innocent person, like somebody's trial for, I didn't steal that, I didn't do that, and they have a different way of presenting themselves and their body language. Very interesting. I really think this is. The psychology of it is great. Is there a difference between curiosity and concern? So Lieberman has that question in the book. He says, is there a difference between curiosity and concern? So let's define what curiosity is. Well, curiosity to me is you want to go out and investigate. Concern means that you are worried. So are they related? Well, I don't know, because I'm curious about the world a little bit, but my concern is that if I'm too much curious, I might run into trouble someday, or I might read something one day and then self-diagnose myself. See what I mean by there? So let's say you're reading something on WebMD about some disease, and you compare it to yourself, or some diagnosis, and then you compare it to yourself. And then the concern is, oh my God, I'm curious about this, but then I'm concerned about I'm going to get it. So that kind of goes a lot. So I think they are related to a certain extent because it's like a mystery. And that kind of relies into your curiosity. Well, maybe the respect towards yourself, but I know I have my respect towards myself is that if I read this diagnosis and oh my God, I have all the symptoms, and the respect is that, you know what, I'm not like that. I'm not like that because I know that I don't have that, or I'm not going to worry about it. So it's just a lot of pick and choose. Anyway, in psychology, psychotherapy, Sigmund Freud, back in the early 1900s, he loved dreams, the dream states, and Sigmund Freud, and the unconscious. And he says that in your brain, you have these kind of like these basic instincts. So one of it, and you're trying to balance your life a lot in your brain. So one of it is the id, the ego, and the superego. So he defines that the id is kind of like free, the impulse. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to go ask that person. I don't care what happens. The ego says, well, okay, go do it, but make sure you act appropriately. The superego says, you know what, if I do that, well, she might have a boyfriend. She looks like she has a boyfriend. And that kind of keeps the morality in check. So the superego kind of keeps your morality in check. And the id is like your impulse. I want to just go do it. I'm just going to go ahead and drink, and I don't care what I'm going to do afterwards. And so it really is a big old balance between your id and your superegos, balancing out your ego, because your ego is the center of it. And so a lot of it's maturity too. And that comes from your self-esteem, how much you feel about yourself. Because if you feel good about yourself, that means you're in control. And so you're trying to balancing that id and that superego out. And you're trying to not be very vulnerable. Because when you're invulnerable, that means you're going to do things that affect you. And or no things that affect you. But if you're vulnerable, that means you're accepting. beings have a little bit of jealousy. I mean, we all have a little bit of jealousy. Sometimes we're jealousy in different things, in different aspects. Maybe in sports, maybe in dating, maybe in jobs, maybe money. We're all kind of jealous, but sometimes we can go over that jealousy and do something that's out of our normalcy. Your id takes over. But it's your personality and your character that has to be in check too. A character is kind of like your acting in your values that you bring to the table. Personality is kind of like how you feel, how your tone is, how you approach things. And it comes from your self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is kind of like your how complete you are, how effective you're going to be at that. How you judge yourself is self-efficacy. There's a whole big book about this if you want to read about this. And that kind of just tells you that, who you are and how you handle life a little bit in a structured way. And so, everybody's experience, depends on what it is, shapes us to who we are today. Your experiences shape the person you are here today. So if your experiences are kind of very negative, well, you're going to become a negative person in a way. But if your experience has been, hey, I've been out there, I've been exploring, I've been doing good things, well, you're going to look at yourself a little differently. So your experiences, I think, do shape the way you are. And this comes with Harry Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow, he has this pyramid, and on the very bottom it says that it's your physiological. So physiological needs is like your water, your shelter, and food. If those things are settled, you can go to the next pyramid, or the next top, or the next level, I should say, and that's like safety. Okay, I have food and shelter. Now I have safety down. Hey, I'm doing pretty good. Do I have friends and family that I can count on? Yes, I do. I have a very loving life. The next thing is how you feel about yourself. It's the self-esteem, because I have all those levels below me that I feel really good. And then at the tippy top is like your personal growth. I have reached the top. I have all my life in check. I'm balanced and comfortable, and I have all these things that I'm standing on that makes me a complete person. And a lot of us, if you don't have one of those things, that we don't feel comfortable. We feel very vulnerable. And we all like to be loved. We all like to be liked. We all want to be liked and loved. And this is kind of what Sigmund Freud called the pleasure principle. The pleasure principle. Pleasure does not mean, well, what that is, but it also means that how you are loved. And we all want to be kind of hugged sometimes and congratulated and praised to make sure that we are a human being. And that ego, and is the ego and self-esteem, they're generally inversely related. So here's what I mean. If a person is happy with themselves, but they have a big ego. So you can be a manipulator and have a big ego. And your ego is like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and think of myself as a strong person. I don't care, but I'm not really a strong person physically, but you think that you're a strong person, you carry yourself around and you just bump into things, or don't take any things from anybody else, and you want to think you're a big macho stuff. And then sometimes that leads into bulliness, by the way. I read the studies that if you have a big ego, that kind of think that your stuff doesn't stink. You become a bully, that, hey, you know what, I'm bigger than you and stuff like that. And I'm going to take control. And self-esteem is not there. And I think that's what he's trying to say, is that is ego and self-esteem related, or they are inverses of each other? Inverses of each other. That's what he was saying. So let's say here's an example. You have somebody listening to a loudness on they have the radio up in their car, and they're singing along, and they have their music blowing through the windows, and you can hear it, obviously. So maybe they have low self-esteem, but they're craving attention from the ego. And I was guilty of this one time, actually, because I used to do that when I was traveling a little bit, is that I turned up the radio up to my favorite song, and I was just having the windows down, and I was having a good time, and I think I just wanted attention and people looking at me and saying I was cool. So it happens. We're all guilty of that a little bit. But the conclusion of this book. There's a lot in this book. There's just too much. The conclusion of this book is that, we are people. We take advantages. Sometimes that we're lied to. Sometimes we're doing the lying. And we're manipulated. And knowing if you are being taken advantage or lied to or manipulated will save you from unnecessary emotional, financial, and possible physical hardships. So we get hurt, or maybe you get hurt by when people lie to you, and because you're taken advantage of, and then you figure out that, wow, that's really hurtful down the line, and you don't know it. So this book kind of pinpoints, or David Lieberman kind of shows, or kind of explores the different aspects of what we should look for and in people, and see who they're all about, because sometimes we do spend a lot of time with them. In psychology, behavioral psychology, when you're hanging around a lot of people for a consistent amount of time, they call it mere exposure. Mere exposure. Because when you meet somebody for just a little bit, you don't have a lot to go on. But if you hang around with them for enough time, you get to know them. It's mere exposure. And I think that's really what the whole point of this is, that you kind of want to get to know the person, or who you're dating, and figure out the signals. And sometimes if you know a person is lying to you, you know what to look forward to. You know what to look at when they're lying to you versus telling the truth. And sometimes that's very hard. But I think it's an interesting thing. Depends on what job you're going into. If you're going to become a sheriff, or maybe a police in the police force, or maybe espionage, they're probably going to teach you a little bit of that, what to look for. But in reality, of the general public, it's good to have those indicators, because you don't know, and you just take a chance sometimes, take a risk, and depends on the person. So hopefully that was interesting. Very interesting read. It's not that long. It's 156 pages, but it's big wording, and they have lots of room, so it shouldn't be a bad read. But hopefully that interests you. I will see you in the next one.